I believe that Laura Cordes is not here yet. Is that correct? Just double check. Okay. Nathaniel Warner,
Very empty in there.
who will be followed by Eleanor Doherty.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and members of the committee, for the opportunity to speak today on SB 636, an Act Concerning Affirmative Consent. For the record, my name is Nathaniel Warner. I'm the Vice President of the Wesleyan College Democrats. I'm presently enrolled as a sophomore at Wesleyan University in Middletown. I grew up in New Haven, went to high school in Wallingford, and have spent my entire life as a proud Connecticut resident. And today you have the opportunity to make me still prouder by voting in support of this act and ensuring that only yes means yes in the state of Connecticut. To be clear, I speak to you today in resolute support of SB 636. I was going to start my testimony with some numbers, but I realized numbers aren't the point, and those who brag about debunking the 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 myth are selectively and perniciously obfuscating the core issue, which is that affirmative consent statutes create healthy mindsets about sex. They make bystander intervention easier, and they make sexual encounters safer. They rewrite a perverse social lexicon in which silence means go ahead, and a too quiet no reads they were asking for it. Affirmative consent standards create communities wherein not fighting hard enough does not foreclose your rights to your own body. But I'm not here today to talk on the prevalence or nature of sexual assault. Sexual assault happens. It happens often, and even more than that, it happens without punishment for the perpetrators. This act would help ameliorate that, and on those grounds alone, I believe you should vote in favor of its passage. However, I wish to use my time today to address a common trepidation concerning the breadth of affirmative consent. Namely, there's a real fear that an affirmative consent standard is overbroad, and universities should instead recognize implicit as well as explicit consent. Otherwise, concludes the belief, benign actions will be labeled as sexual assaults, and jails will swell with luckless dating novices who had the misfortune of leaning in for the ever-awkward first kiss without asking their date first. Such was the sentiment expressed by law professor David Bernstein in an op-ed in the Washington Post back in June, and as a UConn student in another op-ed in the Hartford Courant just recently. Now, recognizing the intuitive appeal of this claim, it's critical to understand that the nature of consent is more fluid and less contractual than this characterization allows. Certainly, an affirmative consent standard demands ongoing consent, but it does not stipulate with precision the form that this must take. Parties to a sexual act may and must decide for themselves what a yes means and for how long it means that. The principal change that affirmative consent secures is an assurance at the outset that both parties are enthusiastic, conscious, and communicative. In other words, it makes sure that a conversation about what consent means and if all parties have it occurs. In all other regards, it preserves and even heightens authorship over sexual behaviors. I ask you to support this act because consent matters, because silence should never mean yes, and because sexual assault is a problem, but it's one that we can address. This is how we do that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nathaniel. Your writing and your speaking are impressive. So what is your major?
I do an interdisciplinary major called the College of Social Studies, which combines government, history, and economics, and I do that in religion.
Well, if you turn that in, we can all write you a letter that you get extra credit, because that was quite good. Any questions? Representative Haddad.
So Nathaniel, thank you very much for coming and testifying today. We spoke briefly out in the hall prior to the hearing, and I hadn't read your testimony, certainly didn't hear you deliver it before then, and I want to say I think you did a great job. Before too many speakers go, I think that all of the students have done a really outstanding job at expressing their opinions. One of the speakers mentioned that I have taken a lot of direction on this issue from students, and that's true. I think that your generation has done a much better job at understanding this issue than folks in my generation did at the time, and arguably do now. And so when I listen and talk to students, I learn a lot about this issue and about how to make sure that our public policy is consistent with what we want to see happen. You said you're from Wesleyan. Does Wesleyan have an affirmative consent policy?
It doesn't have an affirmative consent policy in the same way that Yale and UConn do. It has a broader affirmative consent policy, the type I mentioned that this committee should reject.
Mm-hmm. And one of the other speakers also mentioned spoke to the notion of that these are criminal cases and that colleges are bad at adjudicating them. My view is that we need a broad range of reactions, tools to deal with allegations of sexual assault on college campuses and elsewhere. And to your knowledge, does the so to that point, does if a college initiates a disciplinary hearing against a student, does that preclude the student from pursuing criminal case as well?
No, it absolutely does not. And actually, a lot of criminal charges are foregrounded in the college adjudication process. I would add, though, that what the college adjudication process does is unique in that the student actually lives at the college. The college has the resources to create a safe space for the student in a way that, like, the criminal justice system simply does not. The college is able to understand the student and the student's particular circumstances and adjust circumstances in that student's life to make them feel safe, cared for, and protected, again, in a way that the criminal justice system can't do.
I appreciate that answer, and I guess I would just add one thought to that last point that you just made, which is that we send. I'm a parent now. Someday, I hope my daughter will go to college. We send our sons and daughters to these colleges with the expectation that they're going to be safe, and to that point, I think that colleges and universities have a responsibility to make sure that their student body is safe, above and beyond what might exist in the general population. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you very much for being here today. We appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Chairwoman.
Next, we have Eleanor Doherty, who will be followed by Sarah Yankelin.